Welcome to The Creative Shift. My name is Dan Blank, author of the book Be the Gateway and founder of WeGrowMedia.com. Okay, so today I want to talk about how to get people to buy your book. And really what I want to do here is reflect on some of the strategies and tactics that author Jessica Lahey had shared in my previous interview. So I interviewed Jessica recently, and she talked about the strategies she used for her book launch for her book, The Addiction Inoculation. We had spoken a couple years back, and we talked about the book launch strategies she used for her first book, The Gift of Failure. And I love these interviews, and I want to reflect on it because I think there's so much that needs to be paused and analyzed in what she said. So the first of those topics I want to talk about is the advice that her editor, Gail Winston, gave her, which is that books that continue to sell are books by people who are out there talking about them and speaking. So this is a strategy that really helped define a lot of how Jess manages her career. She really focuses on speaking, on, traveling and speaking to actual groups of people. And what I love about this is that it sounds so logical and reasonable when we hold up a successful author that we really respect. So if you know Jess's work, you'd say, oh my gosh, of course. I mean, she should be out there speaking about this. Her books are so important. They can really change people's lives in a positive way. But then when it comes to us, if I say to you or any author, say, you know what, 6 months, 2 years, 4 years after your book is out there, you should be out there talking about it. The typical author would maybe shrink away from that. They would say, oh my goodness, I don't want to be that author. And that author would be in air quotes. The author who is constantly promoting their own stuff, constantly going on and on and on about their own book, constantly dreaming up new schemes and promotions to get people to look at this book again and again, because most of us can think of some social media profile we've gone to at some point in our lives, and it was nothing but post after post after post after post. Look at my book, look at my book, look at my book. And we would say to ourselves, oh gosh, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be the person who people avoid because you're always self-promoting. If you remember that movie Groundhog Day and the character Ned Ryerson, who people avoided because they'd be in the street, they'd be getting coffee, and they'd bump into him and he would immediately try selling them, I guess it was life insurance. And I think that's a deep fear that most people who create have, is figuring out where is that Ned Ryerson line that they don't want to cross. Of course, this is often mixed with the idea that many of us, we know that we want to create, we don't quite know that we want to share or market our work. And we can easily justify, not a marketer, shouldn't other people do that? And oftentimes when people come to something like a book launch, they will allow it with very limited boundaries. Oh, I will market my book because I'm supposed to do that for this X week period, and I'll do it in this way, and then, the book does what it does at that point, right? And this advice that Jess shared from her editor, books that continue to sell are books by people who are out there talking about them. It flips the whole thing. Jess is also one of the co-hosts of the podcast #MWriting, who was co-hosted by two other amazing and successful authors, KJ Dell'Antonia and Serena Bowen. And it's neat because, another thing that Jess said was that a lot of books hit the bestseller list for a week or two and then go nowhere. And this is something, too, I think a lot of authors gloss over because they just think, oh my gosh, it's a dream. If I could hit a bestseller list, I wouldn't, even for a week, even for a day, why would I want any more? And of course, I like that idea because it means someone's grateful. They're grateful for whatever success a book finds because they know it increases the likelihood of that book reaching a new reader. However, I've worked with authors for a very long time and in publishing for a very long time. And what Jess says has a whole other side of it as well, which is you don't want to do all this work to write the book and create it and publish it, and then you have some element of success, some milestone, and then everything just falls away, and you're like, oh, well, that was nice, okay. And then it doesn't get shared again. It doesn't keep going. And when I talk to an author like Jess and I look at what she's done, it is so inspiring and so astounding because it reminds me of this very difficult lesson, which is that to ensure that creative work of any kind affects someone, it's work. It is work to do this. And what I like about how Jess approaches this is that she illustrates this is a daily job that she goes to. And at times it is a slog, I am sure. However, her enthusiasm is so pure because it's focused on this is why she creates. This is how she knows it can affect someone's life, and this is who she knows it might affect. And what's great is that as you listen to my 2 interviews with her, or if you look her up on any other channel, you really get a sense of that enthusiasm. And none of it comes across as self-promotional in any kind of negative way. It's someone who is doing what they love and doing really good work, and they're dedicated to it. Sort of all the things that we want if we think about like what would your career as an author be or as an artist be or a musician be. And you'd think, well, I want to live the life of a musician. I want to live the life of a writer. I want to be writing all the time and talking to readers and involved in the publishing world. And that's work. So she talked about one tactic that illustrates this idea of how does she get her book out there and make sure it's sustainable beyond just the launch period. So she said the following: I sent these letters out to thousands of school administrators, handwritten and signed personalized letters to school heads, principals, and superintendents. I was very systematic about putting that all in place before the book ever came out. I want you to imagine that. I want you to imagine, and she's writing nonfiction, so it might be easier to imagine, but this is applicable in different ways to memoir and to fiction and to all kinds of other writing. But it's easier to think about with nonfiction, absolutely. Just that idea that before the book launch, you've thought really clearly about who your audience is and where you can find them and what you could do for them. And then you have written out like a template or an email, and then you've sent out thousands of letters. You've had to get the addresses for these people and the names, and you've had to then personalize each letter, and you've had to put them into envelopes. You had to put stamps, buy the stamps, get them to the post office. You had to track them and follow up with them. It is an incredible amount of work. And this is something came up on our first interview, was how often Jess is either sending a letter, sending a gift, or sending a free book to someone, and how this is just a part of her life. And I forget what the quote was from the first interview, but she spends quite a bit of money every year just on postage, just on getting copies of her own book and then sending them out for free to someone. And again, I think this is something that is very counterintuitive to a lot of authors. The first thing you might think with that is like, wait, what? Why am I buying my own book and then giving it away? Isn't the entire point that a book gets published and other people buy it and then I earn revenue, right? And yeah, that can be the case. And one thing I will always stress is that you get to do this any way that you want. Jess's way is not the, in quotes, right way. It's the way that's working for her right now. And she's sending them out not because she's just throwing away money or throwing away her work. She has a system around this. She knows that she wants to become a speaker in these different places that she's reaching out to. So that's very easy to justify when you think of it more as a business expense. And if you've ever looked at advertising or marketing, you realize that the way an ad team would justify what's the ad spend for a certain campaign, you're talking about the cost per conversion. This idea of, hey, if it costs us $12 to get a new lead or get someone sign up for a free trial, we've worked out the value to our business that way. Now, I don't know if Jess has worked it out at that level. But that idea of saying, you know what, I'm going to attach my writing to speaking, and then my speaking goes into a paid career, and that here is sort of the marketing funnel to that. This is how I can think about how I can justify the cost. And I just think it's so neat to look behind the curtain and to just really appreciate how generous Jess is in sharing this, in not just developing that system, but also talking about it on my podcast, on #ImWriting, and wherever else she shows up. Another really big thing that comes through in everything she shares is really what I'd call her go-to book marketing tactic. And that is generosity and the personal touch. And this is also where things that I'm sharing here, things that she's sharing, might sound scary to an author. This idea of, it sounds so business-like and systematic and expensive, and it's not why I'm writing. So much of how she does everything is just filled with nothing but generosity and that a real human connection. So she gave a story here that I thought illustrated this really well. She talked about how years ago she was writing a magazine profile on Adam Savage, and Adam is someone who became well known because he was the co-host of Mythbusters, the TV show. And he's a very well-known kind of, I'll call him a maker, the maker community. He's a special effects artist. He's many, many things. He has 5 million YouTube subscribers. He's a celebrity as far as I'm concerned. And she had a 2-hour interview scheduled with him. And she's saying, so I brought him a gift. And she really gave this a lot of thought, as I guess anyone would with a gift. She said she wanted to give him something that was meaningful to him and meaningful to her. So what she came up with was she had a stack of Letraset letters from her father. Letraset, where there's little, for professionals, these rub-off letters. You get a sheet of letters and you would rub them off onto a design document. So I remember these from years ago. And she had a stack of them, and she figured, Adam being a maker, he has this really amazing studio in California where he has all this design fabrication stuff, raw material, machinery, all this stuff. He's a maker. And she thought he would appreciate that. And she thought he would appreciate the fact that it wasn't just, here's the thing I bought from you for a store, but these came from my father. And the sheet I'm giving you is the last perfect sheet. The other ones are all, she didn't say this, but, I assume half used or crumpled. I don't know. And I kind of paused the interview there and I'm like, why? Why do this? You have 2 hours with him in a hotel, if I'm not mistaken. You are writing a profile. And this is the man who kind of has everything. He's not going to be shocked at Letraset. He has Letraset or seen it. But, it's this idea of why make that effort? Why, when you have so little time, why do that? And why give someone who has everything that one more thing? And she explained that you do it to share something that lets them know that you understand them as a person. And if the gift is special to you, then it creates a story. She said, the best gifts provide a story of the things we carry with us, who we are, where we come from. And that was so moving. She made the point that these gifts should never be lavish. They shouldn't be something that really has a big monetary value or that someone would feel apprehensive to accept because of even tax reasons. Gifts above a certain dollar amount need to be stated, all that kind of thing. You can go on eBay and buy a brand new vintage package of Letraset for a few bucks. So one sheet of Letraset from 20 or 40 years ago, the value of it is pennies. It's, very, very low value, but it comes with a story. And like she says, it comes with her starting off that engagement, knowing that, illustrated to him that I understand what you do and why you do it. And the physicality of what these things do is cool. And the history of them is cool. And what's great is that examples like this come up all the time when you speak with Jess. In our first interview, she talks so much about the power of thank you notes. So go back and listen to those. Okay, so the other way that, she develops her platform, but also encourages people to buy the book. So we're going through her career. We get to the point in her story where she's now getting paid to write articles, all of that, and paid to speak. And then she did something that, again, I think is counterintuitive. She started a podcast. At the time, it was co-founded with KJ Dell'Antonia, and then later on, their third co-host, Serena Bowen, joined them. And I said, why? You're living the dream. There's so much talk in all creative communities about, getting paid for your work. And you'd worked so hard for so long to get paid to write and paid to speak. Why are you now putting all this effort, all this time into a podcast where essentially you're now creating for free? You're giving it away for free. And she stopped me and she goes, well, not only was I not getting paid, but she had estimated something like in the first couple of years, individually, she and KJ each put in around $10,000 into developing and supporting the podcast. So she's paying to have the opportunity to give away this content. And I thought that was amazing. And I think that she does it for the reasons that we do a lot of things, is that she is able to connect with KJ, who she's really inspired by and has a good friendship with. She gets to educate herself by speaking with KJ and now Serena, and they do a lot of amazing interviews. So she has access now to all these people and can learn so much from them. And when you're presenting information, I find that you learn it more. Isn't there some famous phrase that's something like, if you really want to get good at something, teach it? Some phrase like that. But as a podcaster, someone who's written a weekly blog for years, who does case studies, I have found that for myself. If I study something, I have to write about it, I learn it a lot more deeply. And they're now 284 episodes into this podcast, and it is an amazing, amazing resource. Highly recommend you check it out. One thing she talked about on the podcast was why she hired an outside publicist. And this was really fascinating because I think a lot of times people think about the question, should I have a book coming out? Should I hire a publicist? I think that sometimes a writer will want to make that investment, want to do that because they think that way the publicist can do all the things I don't want to do. The publicist, who is obviously a trained professional, they'll figure out how to get the word out there. They will figure out who should be pitched, what the pitch should be, and they'll do the work. And I can kind of go over here. And I mean, that's fine. That's totally fine. But she didn't talk about it that way. She talked about how she had a team at her publisher. She had a publicist in-house at her publisher that was clearly going to be amazing and doing a lot of great work in support of her most recent book. Throughout the conversation, and the conversation I've had before with her, you realize KJ has in it. Sorry, not KJ. You realize that Jess, I've interviewed KJ Dell'Antonia as well. Apologies for the mix-up. You realize that Jess has an amazing network and that she is actively every week working to strengthen or expand that network. So this is not someone who is shy about reaching out. And as she's illustrated, she would be reaching out in major ways throughout her book launch. So she brought in an outside publicist for a very specific reason. There's kinds of media she hoped to be featured in that she felt that she, or maybe even her in-house publicist, wouldn't be focused on as much. So I think the end result was a multi-page feature on Jess and her work in People magazine, and that came through the outside publicist. And it was great to hear about how Jess talked about this as a team effort, where the in-house publicist would be doing certain kinds of work. Jess herself would be doing different kind of work that is unique but complementary. And then this outside publicist wasn't being hired to shoulder the load of all of it. She was being hired for a very specific reason. And it was just so great. Again, it's almost like talking about this in a very advanced business level, because it's not someone hiring that just so they can offload it all, or they can not have to get into it, or not feel that they're dirtying their hands with marketing. It was being really clear about what is each person doing, what is their role, how does it integrate, and then when does she make that investment in resources. So the last story that she told in the interview, I thought, was, again, a really compelling example of how she gets her book out there. So she was saying that she had met what she called a massive philanthropist who had said to her, how can he be supportive of her work? And I was thinking about this moment. So let's just say you have a book coming out, or a book that just came out, and someone comes to you and says, oh my gosh, I love your work. I'm a massive philanthropist. What can I do? And you would think, whoa. So this person presumably has a lot of money and probably a pretty amazing network. What can I ask them to do? And I'm imagining that a lot of people would think of this as, let me ask them to do something that I could never do on my own. What could we do with either an investment of money or using this network that is probably very rarefied, really difficult to get? And it was like just brainstorming ideas. So, and some of these are a little funny, but I do think that they are indicative of how someone might think about an opportunity like this. So the first thing you might say is, can you text Oprah and let her know about my book? Or insert the name of anyone who has a very, very popular book club. Or you would think, do you know anyone who is a celebrity or influential in my space? Because a lot of these people have podcasts they could bring me on or feature the book. Or if they just share about my book on social media, that can have a big impact. And I mean, on our first interview, Jess talked about how Kristen Bell, the celebrity actor, had shared about Jess's book, and it was a huge deal. It was a huge it was a huge promotion for the book, and I believe it led to a lot of great things happening with the book. So it'd be easy to think, oh, you're a connected person. Like, who do you know you can get this book to? Because Jess is a speaker, you could think maybe she would say, oh, can you get me a speaking gig at the following company or at the following conference? Do you know someone here? Because I'd love to speak there. Or could you fund like a major promotion? Can we do something really unique, really next level to get the book out there in a way that I never could on my own? But Jess didn't do that. Instead, she did the following, and this is the quote. She said, "This philanthropist bought me 100 copies of my own book, had them sent to me so I could send them to school leaders, which is what I had been doing. I'm doing in batches, takes a lot of time to wrap up and send 100 copies to school administrators. When I hear back from them, I always email the philanthropist to say, look what you helped me do." And I thought that was incredible because she didn't take it as, oh my gosh, what can we do in addition? What thing can we do that I've never would have felt I could do before? What access do you have? She doubled down on a strategy she was already doing. That's how much she believed in it and knew that it worked for her. And she also gave herself a lot more work. It is so much work to now have 100 more of this, where you've got to now get the book, warehouse the book in your home. Again, everything I said before of getting the names and addresses, now you've got to wrap up the book and mail the book and do all of that and follow up with the person, then follow up with the philanthropist. And it was really amazing to see how practical that was. And to think that a lot of times people might look at an opportunity like that in a very grandiose way, and that Jess was looking at, I know my audience, I know my goals, let me just add more fuel to what I'm doing already. And I thought that was so inspiring and so interesting. So I highly recommend you check out my 2 interviews with Jessica Lahey. The one will have been published just before this episode. The other one is from, I believe, 2019. Look up on my website, wegrowmedia.com. You'll find the links. Of course, check out her work, jessicalahey.com, #I'mWritingPodcast, her books, The Addiction Inoculation and The Gift of Failure. Of course, she's on social media everywhere. All right, my name again is Dan Blank. You can find me on social media at Dan Blank or on my blog at wegrowmedia.com. Thank you so much for listening until the end.